Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here live from the Battery on Masters Saturday.
Masters Saturday. Braves are in the middle of a homestand. It feels like everyone just popped their head out of the sand and was like, oh, what's going on? Sports are here, spring is here, crazy.
But it is Masters Saturday, so just our families listening.
Yeah, that's probably true. The good news is that we're not going to air this one this weekend. There's no chance. So at least people will hear after and be like, oh, that Masters. So I think the timing is good. But Trip, I was lucky enough to attend the Masters yesterday. It was my first time. And as you know, I have some opinions and some observations.
Yeah, what did you think? I mean, I can't believe you finally broke down and went to a golf event first off, but the pristine Masters with your bouncing around all over the place mindset.
So here's my thought. I was very lucky as we were able to secure passes to Map and Flag, which is call it Berkman's 2.0. And for those that don't know, Berkman's is the on-site hospitality for what is oft considered the most
cocktail party
prestigious event that there is, the hardest to get into. I got to go up. I got to take a client who knew it, who's been many times. I was very worried about logistics, but I'm telling you, it was a breeze. We got in and out. We parked. We got to go to this hospitality and waited on hand and foot. Just a million people there to get you what you need. So Map and Flag was amazing. Sports bar-esque, just everything you can imagine. Oysters being shucked in front of you, drinks, fresh pressed juices, just killer. I'm glad I went during a practice round because I got a chance to really walk. I mean, I walked 12 miles through.
The practice rounds are great because you can actually take photos. There's a lot of things you get to do that you can't do during the week.
And they're loose. Like we got to. So one of the coolest things I thought was you can go early, reserve your seat by putting your master seat down. But if it's down and no one's in it, you can just go sit wherever the heck you want to. Yeah. So we got to sit front row on 16 with the Black Lake, and they were skipping the thing across. And my perception was going to be this stuffy place. I mean, there was at least 50 people, 100 people chanting, skip it, every time they got off the tee. So I'm happy I went on a practice round. It is very monochromatic. Like, everybody looks the same. It's like Southern dudes. They're all wearing the same shirts, the same brands, the same shoes, the same Rolex.
I wouldn't say monochromatic because there's color, but I get you the point.
Well, it's monochromatic. Stylistically, everyone looks the same. I made eye contact with like 20 people, and I'm like, I'm like, do I know you? I'm like, oh no, you just look the same as everybody else. My bad. But it is, so what I find fascinating is I couldn't tell if the people that go make the Masters what it is, or the Masters make the people what it is, if that makes sense. It was the biggest thing that stood out in my head because there's I thought it was going to be very security guards everywhere, and the ladies that were working the booths were 80 years old and not chasing anybody anywhere. It was just a nice crowd of people.
Can we get into culture and society right now for a second? I truly believe, and I've been once. I took my dad to the practice rounds about 7-8 years ago, and I talked to a lot of people. I just had someone ask me about if I was going this week, and I'm like, no. But I truly believe that it is one of those institutions that people adapt to the culture of the institution and are on their P's and Q's versus maybe what they're normal. I mean, it's so well respected. I think people will get outside their norm and behave the way they know they're supposed to behave. And I wish we had more of that in society. But I truly believe it's the Masters making people that way for one day, right? Maybe you're outside your norm versus, hey, it's all like-minded people. You can see a little bit of everything there.
And so I agree with you. So let's have the fun conversation of how that's possible. Because here's the part, you pay more money to get a suite for the Super Bowl, right? And people are getting drunk and kicked out all the time. So, and I think there's something to be said about it is not, for the most part, it is not a money thing. It is a lucky thing to get in. They don't care how much money you have. It's just they don't care at all. It's not, so it's more of a, and the demand has just grown and the mystique has just grown. I mean, it's almost one of those places where it can never reach the expectations of what you have until you see it and you realize what your expectations are, and then it kind of resets a new set of expectations. So now it's would I go back? Hell yeah, I would go back. I mean, I'm not paying $10,000 to go, but I would go back. I would enjoy it. I would do things probably very similar, but probably a little different. But what do you think they have done to create such a prominence and such a level of majesty that makes people behave in such a way?
Well, there are a couple things. So one, unlike the Super Bowl, unlike some of the other premium events, it's in the same spot year after year. Okay, so you've got this natural draw, right, versus it's rotating. And even, I've gone to a lot of U.S. Opens, I've gone to PGA events. That even changes year to year. And I have seen differences depending whether I was in Minneapolis, whether I was in North Carolina, whether I was in New York, and things like that. Because that takes a little more of the local flavor of the event, even though it's the U.S. Open.
You don't feel obliged to go because you think at some point it's going to come closer to you. So you don't have to go across the country. As the way the Masters, it's you stay in the same spot and you have to go to it. Okay.
Right. So I think there's a little bit of that is this, people know what to expect. They hear the stories. They hear, you do get, depending on how you get your tickets, you do get, look, if you get thrown out, you're at risk of losing these badges, for whoever owns them. And I don't know how realistic, but it is a threat.
It's funny you mentioned that because when I heard that, I was so on guard and really... That's not the case. Unless you're egregious, people are running and cursing and it's bros and it's like there's not, but at the same time, the threat of having that badge taken away from you because most people didn't buy those. They were given the badges. Right. And that, it's like the secret society. You have to be on know. But again, once you see it in action, it's not like someone's going to scoop you up and tackle you and bring you off property. It's like you got to be really good. Most times they're going to say, hey, you can't do that politely. Thank you, sir. Enjoy yourself.
Exactly.
So the threat is there, but it's not really as much of a threat as they make it out to be.
Yeah. No, and I think you hit on something else, and I'm going to... Don't make the exact comparison, but I think they also handle everything with such a personality and a pleasure. It's almost like walking into a Chick-fil-A, right? And it's, pleasure to serve you. How are you today? And you're kind of it's hard to get angry.
Yeah. So
it really is. It's hard to get upset.
It is Southern hospitality at its finest. Yeah. The entity to which it is would never exist in somewhere like New York. If it was in the course in the Hamptons, someone would get drunk and punch somebody in the face because that is what New Yorkers do. That is just they're more brash.
Black. That's what it is. It's a party at Bethpage Black, which is fine.
It is. It is. So I think that's the other thing is it exudes that Southern charm, but that's also why there is not as much demand for it in New York. There's not a group of people. When I grew up, nobody even cared to even mention it. And I was in a pretty prominent area, and it wasn't even thought about. It's such a Southern thing to go and be a part of it that I think that is part of it.
And there's one other, and this is a logistics thing. There have been times, but I think it's very limited, and I don't know what the numbers are.
They won't tell you.
But the number of tickets, so maybe 10, 15 years ago, they bumped it by a few thousand, right? But they've kept the same number. There's still a lot of people there. But, again, I've done the PGA Championship probably half a dozen times. The first time it was at Atlanta Athletic. The next time it was Atlanta Athletic, I've been up at Hazeltine in Minneapolis, Baldwin. And, that went from, at one point, 10, 15,000 a day to 20,000 a day. Now, depending on where it is, it's 30 or 40,000 a day. That makes a big difference. So some of these other events have, because they've grown so much, it's harder to corral it a little bit. But the Masters, it's the same number of tickets year after year after year.
I have heard otherwise. And I will tell you that I'm not the best counter of crowds, but there are 100,000 people there, without question. Just on a practice round. Just the main congregating area had more people than Truist Park did. So that being said, the course is very open. One of the things that surprised me about the course itself was it was much more, you expect something to be so historic to be like this wide course that weaves in. No, the start of end of a hole and the start of a hole were on top of each other.
And you don't get that on TV. You don't see the fact you can see 4 holes at a time.
It's almost a link style course. But that makes it the viewership and the angles so cool to see someone coming off and going on. And it almost like I got there, you call it, 8:45. I was out by 4:15. It felt like it went by in 10 minutes. It flew by, and there was no phone, which probably is a whole nother conversation of what it's like to not have a phone. The mystique of not having a phone adds to the whole thing. Yeah. And I just left it home, but I left it in the car. But it was an incredible experience. I think the Southern charm has to do with it. I think the fact that there's no entity that has to impress anybody, or there's no for-profit entity. Now they make a profit because the club store was an hour and a half wait in the clubhouse. But what I'm saying is they're not reliant upon anything.
$3 sandwiches and all those other things. You're like, wow, this is pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. It was quite an experience, and I think it can lead to a conversation after the break of just where golf is, because I pulled some interesting stats of just the nature of golf and going from someone who never played to somebody who's so embedded in it now. There's probably some interesting context here, but I think let's finish the conversation after the break about golf. Let's talk a little bit about baseball and opening day, because those are pretty similar audiences, and I think we can have a fun marketing conversation.
So before we do that, where would you put it in your top? I'm assuming now you're going to say it's in your top 5 sporting events that you've been to. How would you rank it, and what else would you put up there?
All right, so the irony is, because I've been in sports for so long, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to ever pay to go to any of these things.
Yeah.
So I would say the one will always be the World Series, because we were so involved in it. I wasn't just watching it. I was watching the dashboards across the world of everything happening is number one.
Yeah.
I would probably put... for example, the first time I got to play Wade Hampton above going to the Masters, because it was the first time I ever got to see what that life lived like, and I got to play it. So being on a course and playing to me is better than watching. Always, it's going to always be. So I would say top 5. I would say I would do it again. I would say the hospitality really is what ties the knot and brings it home, because you really get, I ate like 7 lobster rolls, because they were talking no mayo, real lobster rolls. You just don't find those many places. So I was like, I loved it. But it's not one of those things where I'm going to sing its praises, like, oh my God, you have to go. It's the best thing in your entire life. Because it wasn't that for me, but it was easily top 3 things I've ever done, for sure.
Yeah. If spectator, I won't even get into playing places, because that's a whole different for me. But no, it's in the top 3. The first time I got to go to the Final Four here in Atlanta, back the Maryland one years ago, for being a basketball guy, that was huge.
Yep.
The Masters was right up there, and I got to do All-Star game with the presidents of the U.S. and Mexico back in 1992.
Yep.
So
that's cool.
Those are cool. So anyhow, we'll talk some more when we get back from the break. You're listening to the Marketing Mad Men on Extra 106.3. Welcome back to the Marketing Mad Men. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here, live from the Battery, and we're talking golf, and we're talking spring sports, baseball. I think we'll dive in a little bit to both, in this segment, and then we'll maybe tie it into how do you utilize it, right?
Yeah.
How do you? As a business owner,
maybe we'll get to that.
We'll see. It's kind of fun, but you hit it right before the break of let's talk about where golf is, and I don't want to dive too deep. We got Buck and the guys who probably dive deeper, but golf's in a weird spot. The Masters is above it all, but golf is in a weird spot because of the division that's happened with the 2 tours.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, and look, let's face it, everyone gets excited about Tiger, but the guys at the end. So, it's an interesting spot outside of this week. I think golf's in a position where it's starting to lose itself from a spectator sport.
Yes. Well, so here's this is just an outside observation. I never played golf. I never followed golf.
Yeah.
I knew who some of the guys were. I'll pick it up on a Sunday at Amen Corner. It's just not. But that being said, I think one of the problems with what Tiger created was there's so much parity in the sport that no one's really every time someone gets hot, they just disappear. Rory was the guy that most people were chasing. Rory hasn't won anything in quite some time. He's not the star that everyone thought he was going to be, the savior of the sport. So, you got your Koepkas and these guys that have these really big runs and then they disappear. And, it was DeChambeau because he's hitting the ball and so unorthodox. No one even mentions his name anymore. So it's lacking the star power that I think that has driven the majority of, say what you will about baseball. Baseball is a team sport, but Ronald Acuna is a transcendent athlete that has changed baseball. Yeah. Mostly because he's Hispanic and he's also he's black and Hispanic. So he's this whole group of people oh my God, this is the guy I want to be. Caitlin Clark has changed basketball, but I said this a couple years ago. I believe that when you look backwards, Steph Curry will be more instrumental to basketball than LeBron James was. And Caitlin Clark is proof of that. Caitlin Clark plays basketball like Steph Curry. You know why? Because they don't make 6'8", 260 out of high school very often. They make 6'1", 175 every freaking day. So when you look at the impact, so what Tiger Woods paved this pathway of the sponsorship. And we were talking to some of the players just about who they sponsored in the B2B side. It's UKG, it's Bain, it's all these. So paved this way, but I think it's a little fragmented right now. I think it's a little hard to put your finger on it as to where it's going to be. And I think what the Live did was bring an influx of money, an influx of eyeballs, but really an influx of how over
institutional money, and that's the big challenge. And if you're thinking about it from a hey, I want to sponsor somebody or I want to get involved in the marketing side of things, I think that's the big challenge right now for golf. Is it's become a big money game. It's the institutional people. Honestly, it's like It's like the Premier League soccer. People are buying these franchises because they think of the value is going to go up. And that's kind of what's happened right now with the golf tours. And
but the only reason that I agree with you that's different is because it is not a numbers game. It is it's a qualitative, not a quantitative thing. Like
Yes.
Premier League, yes, they're words, but you're talking about millions and tens of hundreds of millions of followers, as opposed to golf, where it's, I mean, at the best, the Masters is going to do 10 million people. Like Caitlin Clark's
24 million viewers at the peak. For the fun.
Double
I
for
know.
a women's basketball game.
Awesome.
So context is important. But that being said, the 1% of people that are watching golf are the ones that probably control 90% of the wealth. I mean, you could throw these stats out if you really did that math.
Which, and where I'm going is, and I've done some of this in the past in my career, is I don't think for the most part, there's always exceptions. You find an up-and-comer, right? And you get someone, you talk about Steph Curry. I mean, the Under Armour, the story with Jordan Spieth, I mean, they nailed it.
Yeah.
They nailed Jordan Spieth and all that.
Puma did a great job with Fowler. I mean, like these guys, you get guys.
But you can, and there's some others that are interesting. You may remember, and I know he's local, but Stuart Sink. So after I left, Oldcastle, but we had ran the Bellegarde business. They had, about 2 years later, they had a connection to Stuart's son.
Yeah.
If you remember when Stuart had that run a couple years ago, his son was caddying.
Yeah.
He was wearing a hat.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought it was Bridgestone. It was Bellegarde.
Yeah, that's cool.
And there was a small, there was a connection there. They paid him. They got a lot of play out of it, but they utilized it in the right manner. That's hard to do. You have to, it's almost lightning in a bottle. To me, doing golf and some other things, I've done NASCAR and others over the years. If you utilize it, back to what you originally said, going to the Masters, you start taking people to the event, use it as a customer experience, give them an experience they might not otherwise get, spend 6 hours with them. To me, that's the real opportunity in golf for businesses. It's rare that it's going to be, hey, a real marketing play.
Yeah, I agree with you. So 2 parts. One, we got to do at a private event with Stuart Sink a couple of months ago, and Stuart Sink sits on the governing board of the PGA. Stuart Sink, because of who he is and the personality and the Atlanta part of it, is much more to golf than just him playing. But he told the story about having his son, because his son was playing at Clemson, I believe, at the time. But he told the story about it, and that was his driving force. He's also a very personal guy. He speaks the business lingo. He's more than just playing golf, which I think leans well to it. But, the other side, I think one of the things that's really hard to think about, like, we are at the top of an economic cycle right now, right?
Yeah.
We are in the boom. So much wealth has been generated, really since the end of the recession, really since the end of COVID, how much wealth. So the problem, you're right, but people expect to be taken to the Masters. And when you expect to do something, it loses the value in which it has behind it. So, we deal with this all the time. Like, right, I got a lot of Braves tickets. So what happens is people are like, oh, I want to put in a request for 30 games. Like, no, that's not how this works. You're not paying me for tickets. That is a hospitality event to which, so you have to start saying no. And what happens is these companies, every one of them has a different pro and taking you to a different tournament. And there's nothing really exclusive. What the Masters has done a really good job of is maintaining that exclusivity by not saying, oh, I don't care that you're from Chase Bank. Like, we're not doing. Or I don't care that there were these guys with these NetJet shirts on. NetJets didn't pay $1. They just all wore their shirts and paid a lot of money to be there. That's their own kind of marketing thing. So I think you're right, but it's part of that same problem is, when does the value proposition turn upside down? And I think what you're starting to see is people are realizing that the value proposition, and Live convoluted those waters more, because then there's a whole nother tour to sponsor with less people watching, but still hired pots.
A lot less people watching, yes.
But the pots are higher.
Yeah.
So the math is upside down. So I think we're in the spot now where, but that being said, it will find itself because it has to. And now the other side of this, there are more people playing golf now than there have ever been before.
Absolutely.
So,
there's been articles about country clubs are probably the first time in 20 plus years are actually in a pretty good financial spot.
Yeah. So let's place a game here. How many people in this country do you think play golf?
20 million.
Okay. So more than 1/3 of the U.S. population over the age of 5 has played golf on course or off course. So this is the important thing.
Has played versus played.
123 million people.
Okay.
And they're at the point, I saw the stat a couple of months ago, where the number of people playing Topgolf and simulators has now passed the amount of people playing golf.
Oh, I believe that, yeah.
20 million playing regularly sounds about right, which sounds like a high number. It's not.
Yeah.
But 123 million. So that is where this starts coming in. It is encroached into lifestyle.
Yeah.
If you saw how many people were in line to get gear at the Masters who probably never play in their lives, it is encroached on lifestyle, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's a really good thing because all of a sudden now that lifestyle means there's more money for people to be made that are adjacent to it.
You got in Buckhead over the next 3 weeks in April, and that's all you see is people wearing the Masters gear like Nick here. Yeah.
Yeah, look, but the problem with it is that this is one of those games that has desperately tried not to change for so long that now that change is coming, what do they do with it? And that live thing also aligned perfectly with this bleeding over of lifestyle. Like, I'll give you an example. Tennis has done a really, really poor job at this.
Horrible.
A really poor job of this. So golf has to protect the institution, which is a bunch of stuffy old white people. They have to protect the institution while trying to pretend like they want the masses there. They really don't. Most country clubs you go to do not want people to show. They don't want people to show up because it has got its bourgeois that's pushed aside. Most courses, and I've been lucky enough.
People want their own little tea times. They don't want to have a lot of people competing.
I've been lucky enough in my life where I've played some courses I have no business being on, and I've learned the etiquette. But you are not wanted there. Yeah. You are not wanted as a public foursome in one of these private clubs.
Is that a personal attack about me?
But you know what I'm saying? You're not wanted there. I mean, you almost feel it. Now, again, I'm with the right people. I know the right moves now, but like you play at these places. So I think the line has to be drawn, and I think Live is going to convolute that because Live is just like, hey, we're going to pay everybody. We're just going to pay. Doesn't matter what you are on the tour. We're going to pay everybody. Yeah. So I'm curious to see where it goes from there. I got some more stats for you. Ready?
Yeah.
So, so here you go. This is a better one. So, how many beginners per year do you think are coming into golf? So how many people picked it up? Maybe they just started playing. Maybe they hit with the Topgolf.
Okay, so with the Topgolf, and again, I've been on record. I was totally wrong about Topgolf. I've said it a few times. I think with the Topgolf and the way it's expanded, again going back, you said 120 million have quote played golf. It's probably a couple million a year.
Yeah, so pretty good. 3.4 million people a year are entering golf, and again, the hardest thing, and it's funny because I personally hate that I think this way, but like I really don't want to go to Topgolf anymore. Like I really want to go play golf. Like I don't want to go. These simulators, and I get the thought behind it, but like I'm not in the point in my life where I need to be. I have so much time to better my game that I need to go to a simulator on top of it. So, but at the same time, how it enters people in. Like I took my 6-year-old daughter. She's not going to a golf course, but I was like, hey, bring your tablet, come hang.
And maybe an hour and a half is the ultimate of attention span as well.
Maybe
so
she's
it's
good.
Perfect.
You know, she was hitting a ball, and she was making contact. You would have never known that if you didn't bring her out. Now all of a sudden, making contact becomes, hey, let me get you a little set of clubs to hit a Topgolf. Then all of a sudden, it's, hey, let's try some grass. So I really appreciate the fact that it's there, and I think that's why it was bought out. That's why Callaway bought it to set this whole entry level thing up. But I'm wondering what the sport is going to allow to happen. And I think we bring up a good point. And let's talk about it a little bit more. Because it is so B2B dominant, the brands aren't really doing a good job of connecting to the consumers, right? Even the sponsorship and stuff. Like, just because your UKG is sponsoring a golfer, the B2C, they don't know what UKG is. They have no idea that it's a merger of all these old entities. So most people you can say would have heard of Ernst & Young. They don't know what Ernst & Young does. They have no idea in the world. So I feel like that B2B thing is also limiting its potential to reach consumers.
Yeah, and I think this is where the rise, and I've seen a lot of it in social media with, man, I'm going to call it more on the clothing side of things, but some of these, let's call them more radical clothers, and what is it? I'm drawing a blank, but John Daly wears one of them. Loudmouth Sports or something, I think is one of them, and then
they're fleeting, dude. They're fleeting.
But those are the ones that are trying to get in and to do something different outside of the Nikes, the Pumas, the FootJoys, etc.
And they exist, and I like that they're there, but they're fleeting. That's the same thing. Yeah. I mean, if you look at sneakers, Joel Embiid just left. I think it was Under Armour, and he just signed with Skechers.
Wow.
Skechers. So now here's the thing. When you start breaking down numbers, Skechers has more stores than any of the brands other than Nike. Skechers is in Walmart and all this. So if you're Joel Embiid and you're making a cut, what do you want? Distribution points? Because demand is already created for you. If you're going with New Balance, they have none of that stuff. They have stores, but they're not selling basketball shoes. So I think athletes are becoming more savvy with this.
And they're bringing the crossover. You go back to the Caitlin Clark. This is actually, I saw a stat this week. The Sabrina Ionescu's actually has more men in the NBA now wearing than at any time. It's like by 4 or 5 times a woman's endorsed shoe. And I think it's really, really cool. And so they're starting to do that crossover. And the whole point is it's not a women's shoe. It's not a men's shoe. It's basketball. It's an athlete. It's a functional shoe.
Yeah.
And it's pretty well designed. I mean, there's, aesthetically and all that. But I think that was pretty cool. And I think that's the opportunity you have to think about. And even going back, whether it's Loudmouth or some of these others, they're going at such a niche, they're still going at the guys, right? Yeah. And I think where you got to think about this is, all right, how do you broaden your exposure a little bit? It's not men playing golf. What about women playing golf? Kids playing golf? How do you balance that?
My gut tells me one of the things about golf is it will stay traditional. And like if I'm the TaylorMade, like I'm not overreacting to any of this stuff. I'm staying my course because ultimately, the real money is in the people that are going out and playing every week, right? Those are the people that are buying new clubs, and the gear is just, the money, the lifestyle brand, I get it, but nobody that doesn't have interest in golf is going out wearing full golf attire every day. It's people who are interested or adjacent to it that are wearing it.
Well, it's really interesting in that, and I think that's why Nike got out of the golf club business 7-8 years ago. Nike they sold clubs to people that were new to the sport. But I think what they found, and back to your traditionalists, you mentioned TaylorMade, you look at Callaway and some of those, Ping, those are the diehards. And I don't know the specifics, but the diehard golfers, I'm going to say, buy new clubs every 2.4 years. Whereas the people who are just coming in, they might buy clubs once and they never buy them again. And I think that's why Nike got out of it, is they never got into the repetitive buyers.
Well, look, so this is from context from somebody on the tour that told me this. One of the reasons that PXG has been so successful is because the traditionalists like Mizuno have backed out. And I mean that when you go to a tour, even if it's a match you're not watching on television, okay? All the golf brands are there talking to the pros, offering sponsorships, fitting them. Mizuno just decided to stop showing up. So as good as Mizuno clubs are, the demand stopped, and now all of a sudden this opening for someone like PXG, and PXG has come in, and the thought process amongst golfers is they're not quite there yet. They're on Gen 7, but by Gen 9 or 10, they will be better than Mizuno clubs because they are investing so much in the R&D to make these clubs better that. Right, when you're playing golf, you don't want to be seen with crappy clubs. I made the mistake. My first time I ever played golf, I bought like Wilson golf clubs from Sports Authority, and I was looked at like I had 7 heads because I was playing. So I think that there's a fine line between. But you're right. Nike got out of that business. Now, ironically, if you look back, some of Nike's clubs are worth an exorbitant amount of money because
collectors
people
now
want to play those clubs. I had a Vapor, a blue and yellow Vapor. I wish I held on to it. It's going for $500-600 on eBay for a 3-wood. So,
but they thought they were used to going after the masses and not the high repetition target niche. So, hey, we and don't get me wrong, I love to talk golf, but we also were talking, baseball season's in full flight. So, what are you seeing so far, whether it relates to the Braves, the Braves radio network, but just baseball in general? And how do you see some of the challenges? I mean, look, injuries are coming up. How's that going to affect the marketing of sports?
Yeah. Well, I could give. So I'll give you another. I'll start with another question. How many people do you think were watching on opening day on TV?
I think it's poor. I think people are excited about opening day, but I think people go to the highlights nowadays. You're talking across the country. Well, what do we say? 24 million watch the basketball game. I'd say maybe half of that, 12 million.
Yeah. Well, look, so it's 1.6 million people on average that were watching baseball. So 1.6 million people. So it sounds small, and it is small, but there's 162 games. So one of the things if someone came to me and said, and this is not just my loyalty to the Braves, that I could sponsor football, baseball, basketball, it doesn't matter what it is, I would say go to the baseball team. 1, I think they have the best tie to the local community. 2, I think they have the most opportunity for hospitality. 3, I believe anything you can do in life is better by repetition and doing it multiple times. And I think baseball, for all it's worth, for all the viewership, for all the things, is something that people, the ones that are passionate about, are crazy passionate about baseball. So I think that those numbers are...
And if you're going to do it over a frequency throughout the season, right? I think then you're absolutely... If you're like, I've got a week, then wait a second. That's totally different.
Of course,
But
if you're a tax company, then you want to be on during March Madness because
Right.
your tax day is April 20th, and you're too late for baseball. So, but I'm just saying, if all things were equal, and I think mostly I believe that because I think baseball does the best job of connecting to the local town in which they're with and allows the masses to come. Man, going to a football game is too expensive for majority of families. Most baseball teams these days do $10 tickets still. They still want everyone to be there. And I think there's something about sponsorship that touches, I think, a better job of.
Yeah, well, from looking at the White Sox, I think they probably should do $3 tickets. You know, there's a few places. I'm sorry, that's probably a low blow, but there's still a few places that are really hurt.
You think Oakland was bad in Oakland? They're playing in Sacramento.
I know. God, that's
in Sacramento.
That's
so you want to see what bad is? That's what's bad. I also think that one of the hard times, and again, it's because there are so many games, and just because how the rights deals were negotiated, baseball people can't find the freaking games, man. It's really hard. The Bally's model, we all know what's happening with Bally's. It will be gone. The Bally's name will be striped off. It will be Diamond Sports again. Who knows if they exist? Their direct-to-consumer model got really convoluted by BAM, which is Baseball Advanced Media, which is owned by Disney that owns the rights to the digital portion. It's been around for so long, they got very far behind the curve and so far back that I think it'll be 3-4 years before this Bally's ordeal is taken care of.
Right.
The good news is, I believe that they will start signing deals for free to play over television airwaves again, and they will. They just want to get it in front of as many people for free as possible.
Well, they need to, otherwise they're going to be losing out to some of the other sports, right, and other entertainment options.
I think it's going to happen, and I think that the one thing about baseball is if you're a baseball fan, you very rarely want to watch anything but your team. So like Friday Night Baseball, like you're not watching I'm not watching the Yankees play the Dodgers. I just don't care. If I want to watch,
but Apple and those guys did it for other reasons, right? They wanted to be able to throw the logo up. They wanted to announce to their subscribers that, hey, we're in this game.
And remember, there's first-party data that comes along with it. Everything they do has, again, the data is the commodity.
Exactly.
It's not a matter of cutting the. And look, they can stroke big checks, but there's ways for them to offset those revenues that there's not, because all of a sudden now, it's much easier to watch Apple on an Apple device, and now we're making people buy Apple. Like there's much more to it, and I think that's what convolutes it all. And I think that's why it's not fair to look at just viewership numbers. For example, I mean, the Braves radio network is 178 stations and is doing hundreds of thousands of streaming sessions per night. So if the radio is doing 150,000, 200,000, well, that's now closer to 1.8 million, which changes that number substantially, because you know what no one's doing? No one's going out of their way to listen to a football game on radio. It just does not have the same thing as baseball has. So, I think some other fascinating stats. Baseball is by far the worst at social media. By far.
Oh, yeah.
But let's talk about who the generation watching it is. Let's talk about who's watching baseball.
Yeah, they're not on, social media, or they're on Facebook if they're on anything, right? So, I mean, that's the demographic.
That's the demographic. But I also think one thing that works in baseball's favor is you age into baseball. Okay, you don't age into an NBA fan. You start an NBA fan and you stay an NBA fan. I aged into baseball, right? I watched them. I loved going to games. I was always aware of what the team was doing, but I was never let me learn the nuance of this game and what all these different stats are. Now I'm much more involved in baseball.
And I think you can be a casual watcher of baseball. You can pop in for 20 minutes and then move out.
Well, yeah, because some of the advanced statistics you're talking about are aggregated over a whole season. They have nothing to do with an individual game, right? I mean, my goodness, you can watch guys. Acuna could be in a slump and be batting 230 by the end of the season, batting 350. Like, that's insanity to think about that. How big the fluctuations can be, because it's such a long season. Basketball's not that far. Some of these guys start averaging 18 points a game and end the season at 30 points a game. It's crazy. Speaking of sports, though, I do have to give a shout out. I never do this, but dude, Jalen Brunson on the New York Knicks. When I say the godsend that this dude has been, he is fourth in the league in scoring right now. We took this dude from the Mavericks. He has made more excitement for being a New York Knicks fan than I've ever had in my life. And you don't understand how Knicks fans are, dude. Knicks games sell out 25 years in a row. They haven't won anything. They sell out 25 years in a row. They're sold out.
I got other fans that are Knicks fans, and it's been fun watching the the sheer abomination of the Dolan
They
era.
are so loyal, though. That arena. Now, that being said, it's not fair. It's 16 million people that can converge an arena by train. That makes it a lot easier to go. But anyway,
when we come back from the break, that's going to lead into my prediction that we had from the kickoff predictions for the year, and we'll come back to that. And we'll talk a little bit about the Hawks and a few other things on this Master Saturday. So you're listening to the Marketing Mad Men on Extra 106.3. All right. I still don't know that they'll do it, but the last 2 months have proved that I was right, that the Hawks are better off without Trae Young.
Yeah, so I've listened to some pretty advanced stats and statistics about that. And the team is not better without Trae, and the team was built incorrectly around Trae Young.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Trae is not a
Yeah.
1A. He is a 1B. And they truly need.
So the only reason I disagree is because Trae Young, at its core, even if you take turnovers out, will still be a top leader in assists in the league.
Yeah.
Trae Young needs a beta that knows how to be a beta.
Right. Maybe
Like,
it is
I'll
a
give you an
true
example.
1B.
Kawhi Leonard would be the best person next to Trae Young. DeJounte Murray was not.
A great wing or power
That can
forward
defend
that can
anybody, who can defend anybody. Paul George would have been a great, because they take the
100%.
Trae Young. The problem is that he is so easy to lock down and defend, because even if he's scoring, the team's still losing because he does not do the other things because he's so little.
I know.
He does not move.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's have that. We can bring it. Let's have that
Yeah,
conversation.
that's fun. Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here on Master Saturday. And so we're, all right, you're talking, you got your little plug for the Knicks.
I hear you're going to bring this back to predictions.
Yeah, I said my prediction for 2024 is that the Hawks would finally realize and they could get more from trading Trae Young and, rebuild the team, because the team, as it's constructed, and I think that's what we were talking during the break, is flawed. And
Let me tell you the problem with your thought process. There's two parts to this. One, as good as Luka is very similar to Trae.
Oh.
As good as Luka is, and the Dallas will be fine. They're not winning. As good as Luka is, he's very similar to Trae.
Oh,
And
I'm not
two,
going back
the
to the
second Trae leaves.
Yeah.
The team he goes to will be better than the Hawks will be automatically.
Oh,
and he will
absolutely.
be a superstar because the team was poorly constructed around Trae Young. Trae Young's skill sets are really simple, okay? Trae Young is one of the best draw, dish, foul guards in basketball. He can shoot from anywhere. He stretches a defense. The other side is, in the playoffs, he is maybe 5'10" and 145 pounds on a good day, soaking wet, and it is very easy to watch tape on him and to defend him on tape. Which means, who cares about 82 regular season games? Nobody in the league does. Trae Young does. Nobody else in the league does. They care. Does he make the guys around him better? And I'll say, I go back to Brunson. He only averages 5 assists a game. He makes everybody around him better by just making smart things with the ball. Trae Young is so lackadaisical with the ball in his hand. He is not looking to do the right thing for the game. He's doing the right thing for himself.
Exactly. Like I said, and I 100% agree. I'm not saying they will do it. I think they would be better off trying to find, a different place. And I think Trae would be better off in a different place. But there's the business side of having to make that work. And whether it would happen.
Let me give you some context. They're saying Joel Embiid, if he was to be traded, would require 3 first-round draft picks and 2 first-round pick swaps. Okay? Joel Embiid will make whatever team he goes to an immediate contender. Trae Young will not make a team an immediate contender. So if the Hawks could get a haul anywhere near that, I would ship him off so fast. The NBA has changed so quickly. You can catch a European kid that no one's heard of a year and a half later, be the number 1 draft pick. So there is so much, actually less volatility in drafting now than there has ever been, that you are guaranteed, if you get 5 draft picks, that you should hit on at least 2 of those draft picks. And just I acknowledge this. You should have kept Luka. Cam Reddish was a complete bust that came along with Trae when they traded away, and you have not drafted. DeAndre Hunter, for all it's worth, is at best a rotational
when he's healthy.
When he's healthy, at best. So you missed on almost everybody. The one guy thought you had in John Collins, you shipped off to Utah, where he's a disaster there too, but again, the team's poorly constructed. I think it was a very smart prediction. I think it's come true because he's been injured for the past 2 months. I think they're 10 seed, which means they have no chance on God's earth of doing anything. I also think that it is a hard thing in Atlanta. If they had went and picked a white European guy over a black kid from the South, that they're in their heads, the market would have revolted against them. And it goes back to one thing I will say: all people care about is winning. And I know you get caught in the politics of all this stuff these days, but these people want a winner. And right now, the way this team is constructed, this team is the opposite of a winner.
Exactly. And what they got is a name, and that's what they drafted for, and that's now they're having to deal with that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
That being said, the financial ramifications of drafting him saved that team, because with a new arena opening with Trae Young coming in, he made that team a lot. And I understand.
I'm not negative on Trae, and I think Trae has been good. Here's the best way to put it. I think Trae has been very good for the Atlanta Hawks, but unfortunately, he is never going to be great, exceptional, a championship difference maker.
Isn't it funny that if I were Trae Young, the only thing that I would do for the rest of my life is turn on old games of Steph Curry and just do that.
Yeah.
The model is made. Steph Curry is undersized at best. The model is made. But you know what? If you watch Steph Curry Davidson to Steph Curry now, his shoulders bulked up over his ears. Trae Young hasn't gained a pound.
I remember him because I obviously went to Davidson, but freshman year and the uniform is like, oh my God, can't they get him a smaller uniform? You know, he was nothing.
And he has grown and he's been better. Just watch. The model is built. The biggest problem that you have, most NBA players that come to these AAU things, they don't understand how to move away from the ball because their whole life they've been the best player on their team. They've won just by holding the ball in their hands. Basketball doesn't work that way. College basketball, I mean, my goodness, you would have told me that UConn, that the coach of UConn 2 years ago had the opportunity to leave to go to Kentucky and be like, what do you mean go to Kentucky? Are you out of your mind? I'm staying at UConn. Who would have ever written that down?
Well, going back to Caitlin Clark, the passing in the women's Final Four was, I mean, it's incredible. Crisp. It was like, this is what I grew up with.
Crisp.
It's unbelievable.
Crisp.
It was fun.
It's crisp. They're leading passes. They're predicting where people are going. I mean, like, again, that is a lost art, man. Remember Steve Nash? He wasn't passing the ball to where you are. He's where you thought would be, which made Amari Stoudemire, who was an average basketball player at best, look like a superstar every day because of the way Steve Young used to pass. John Stockton is a great example. Those guys were not pure basketball players. They were point guards.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out there since we're doing mid-year predictions now, and we got Nick talking about earlier about his Knicks. So what's the Knicks prediction for the playoffs?
Oh, dude, it's so hard. Julius Randle, who dislocated his shoulder, usually a dislocated shoulder, you think you come back 2 months, he's having season-ending surgery. So your second best player is now out. So my bet is that they compete really hard to get into the Eastern Conference Finals, but they lose it in game 6 or 7. So they won't get into the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know who it's going to be. It depends because the 3 through the 6 seeds are so close. I don't know who they're going to play. I don't know how they're going to line up, but they are going to.
And it's going to be matchups probably to see who. I mean, you'd have to say the Celtics are the odds-on favorite, but it still could be matchups.
No, the Celtics are the odd-on favorite for the whole thing. They are built really well. They have lots of depth. Jason Tatum is a bona fide superstar, but if Julius Randle was healthy, I would say that the Knicks would be Eastern Conference champions no matter what, and they could take anybody down the way that team is built right now. Mitchell Robinson hasn't even had a chance to play. OG can guard everybody. It's the right team, and the beauty is that they are $30 million under the cap and could go to anybody they want to, which is the Knicks have never said ever. Let's finish predictions. Let's talk about what do you think the Hawks do next year.
Well, again, I think they've got to do some soul searching about do they keep Trae, and if they do, is he willing to stay while they implode it? Because you're absolutely right. They're constructed horrendously.
And one of the things that has changed in basketball is here's what you have to do. This is football, too. You have to draft well enough to get yourself to be relevant, and then you have to spend over the cap to get the stars in to make you win. Wrestler has shown an unwillingness to go over the cap, which means Trae Young, to an extent, has been set up to fail. So, again, so what do you think they do next year? Do you think they trade Trae?
The old adage of a leopard doesn't change his spots, I think it's going to be the same thing. I don't think they're going to be willing to spend. So I think they're going to just kick the can down the road. They're going to try to, we'll draft someone great, and maybe we can do another John Collins trade and trade DeAndre Hunter, and they're going to get middle, and they're going to be they're going to be 8th or 9th again next year. I mean, I wish I could say differently.
Doesn't it feel like Atlanta lives there, the Falcons too? That
outside of the Braves. Alex is totally different, right?
Yeah.
And I think I think the leopard doesn't change its spots. And I think
one thing that's going to dictate this is how Damian Lillard does in the playoffs. Going to Milwaukee, you thought you had 2 stars. This was done for, and they didn't have a very good season. And Giannis got hurt last night too, so who knows what happens? But it's funny because we're making predictions now. We'll air this while the playoffs are going on. Yeah. I will say right now, the market for Trae will not be as robust as people think they are, because when someone is backed in a corner and they know they want to trade him, the market works against him. I think you'll get 3 first-round draft picks. I would be shocked if you get more than that for him, which is a shame because I think he is worth it to the right team.
Yeah, but he has to be the right team, and it's got to be someone that can bring something back and needs him. And who's that going to be? And it's going to be someone out west. The Clippers. Would they give up someone? Who knows?
Spurs. Him and Wemby next to each other with Popovich coaching. That was an automatically team will be a contender for the next.
I think
10 years.
And Embiid, your earlier comment, but does Maxey do anything more than Trae does? And I don't think that's going to answer anything. So hey, this was fun. I know it's not our normal. We weaved in a little bit of marketing, but it's still fun. It's spring, it's sports, and I think that's the other key is a lot of businesses talk about sports, right, in your discussion. So you've been listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We'll be back next week.